You're an entrepreneur. You're a leader. You're a high-performance individual. But many of you are so busy, you're thinking about today only. But what about tomorrow? This is the Alchemist Lounge. We focus in like a laser beam on exploring the art of transformational leadership, company culture, and the alchemical elements of creating and managing healthy and thriving organizations. This is a forum for leaders to hear cutting-edge perspectives, learn how to evolve yourself, and build thriving and sustainable leadership habits and businesses that stand the test of time. Get ready to learn from one of the best, the Alchemist Lounge, with your host, Alex Atwood.
Everyone, welcome to another episode of the Alchemist Lounge. I'm your host, Alex Atwood, and today we have a very exciting guest. And I say that because I've always been fascinated about hypnotherapy, hypnotism, hypnotherapy, and all of that. And now we get to talk to Matthew Brownstein and his transformative journey into spirituality, health, and healing began with a profound spiritual awakening back in 1992. And this awakening ignited his pursuit of truth within the world's greatest wisdom traditions. And that propelled him to explore the depths of philosophy and religion. So drawing from his unique background, Matthew eventually founded the Institute of Interpersonal Hypnotherapy, where he continues hypnotherapy, neuro-linguistic programming, which is called NLP, and some other modalities to facilitate personal and professional transformation. So today we have the privilege of delving into Matthew's insights and experiences. So join us as we explore the profound realm of hypnotherapy, NLP, and their applications for self-actualization, healing, and empowering high-performing individuals, including business leaders and executives. Thank you so much for coming onto the Alchemist Lounge, Matthew.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate the introduction.
Absolutely. So to start things off, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what inspired you to establish the Institute of Interpersonal Hypnotherapy?
It all starts with the experience you mentioned that happened to me in 1992. I was 19 years old. No, normal Java person, whatever that is, nothing like special before. I wasn't spiritual, wasn't religious. My parents weren't. But all of a sudden, and I wasn't like into this stuff. I had an experience of profound light, love, peace, joy, bliss, oneness. It was awe-inspiring. Everything went from duality to oneness. It went from feeling like a separate individual to feeling one with this universal love. And the experience felt so real and so good and so right. I figured, that's just going to be like this forever. That's just my natural state of being. And the next morning it was gone. So I had to figure out what that was and to tap back into it. Long story short, because you went from that to the Institute, I majored in philosophy and religion. As you mentioned, I studied Chinese medicine and 2 different acupuncture colleges. I really wanted to find a way to help people to tap back into that state of being. But I wasn't finding it in any path except when I finally found hypnotherapy. I was like, that's the answer. The mind is the problem. Nothing I've been studying really gets to the mind the way hypnotherapy can. And I started practicing in 97, practiced for 10 years. And once I realized I really think I know what I'm doing, then I opened Florida's first state licensed school for hypnotherapy training. Eventually we turn that into and call it the Institute of Interpersonal Hypnotherapy. So I've kind of become a leader in the field. My team is like, you created a movement. I'm like, I don't know if I intended to. I just wanted to relieve human suffering through the power of the mind. And we've kind of created this wave now of many, like we've almost 1,000 graduates who are out there doing this work. And it's so beautiful.
Well, let's not rush through it because I'm so curious about what happened in 1992 that impacted you in this profound way. What was it?
Yeah, well, I was lying in bed. I just finished having sex with my girlfriend, so that's just the truth of the story. And she was just rubbing my chest, and then all of it, that was it. It was just like, lying there, just kind of, cuddling, and all of a sudden, bam! I didn't know what it was, and It's very hard to describe. I use words like peace, love, joy, bliss, oneness. It was as if everything, and I don't use the God word lightly, and I'm not being religious, but I was like, whoa, this is God. Whatever they mean by God, this is God. It just felt
Mm.
universal and important. Like if everybody could feel this, we would stop hurting each other. We would stop suffering. There wouldn't be pain. Like it was pure goodness. Um, so yeah, I started asking family and friends, have you ever had this experience of unified, like I didn't use the word then, but like unified mystical consciousness? Have you ever like known yourself to be part of the absolute unchanging reality? And people thought I was crazy. My girlfriend heard me saying those type of words, but I wasn't speaking that way before that event. And she's almost like, who are you? Like, what are you saying? She was crying. She was scared. I'm like, I'm just telling you, everything is love. Everything is light. And then again, the next morning when that feeling was, I wrote 20 pages in my journal that night because I just was trying to understand, what happened and writing down, every little detail of, how I perceived that. So nobody had the answer, family and friends. But I was in college and I changed my major to philosophy, thinking maybe the philosophers know. 19 years old, what do I know? And they had a lot of intellect, but they didn't have
Yeah.
a way to duplicate that experience. They might debate if God exists, but they couldn't get me to feel that again. And then when I changed my major to religion, they talked all about this, of course, but they didn't really teach you how to get into it. It's then I
Hmm.
found the mystical branches of religion, and you're about alchemy, so like going into the deeper teachings that are truly transformative, I discovered there are ways to duplicate the experience, and I'm far from the only one who ever had it. So my major in college essentially was studying the great saints and sages of the world's religions so that I could figure out what's happening inside of them, so that I could have more of that and get more of that, give more of that to others.
So was this a meditative state? And when you had this awakening, what was it like? What did it feel like?
Well, if you've ever felt like if you have children, like this feeling of love, profound, profound love. Like I remember when I first held my daughter to
Yeah.
my chest, it was like, whoa, it's so like not the first time, but like one night, just holding her when she's a baby, holding her in my chest, like, whoa.
Yeah.
It was like that times 100.
Yeah.
It was like the most love you could feel for another human
Wow.
being. It was that permeating everything. It wasn't just an emotion. It was a state of being, and it was an unconditional state. I knew somehow
Mm.
this is the underlying fabric of the universe. So it wasn't just like, oh, I had good sex that night,
Mm.
or like I had a brief moment
Yeah.
of ecstasy or something. This was like really the best way I lived in India and went really deep understanding these teachings. And one way to describe it is absolute bliss consciousness. It's absolute, it's unchanging, it's eternal,
Mm.
it's always there. It's pure bliss. It's you might call it like divine sweetness, or just the most delicious, like all pervasive love.
Mm.
And then consciousness, meaning it's our very own awareness. So it wasn't necessarily like I felt something, I
Yeah.
discovered in that instant, I am that something. It's not subject object where
Mm.
I observe it. Because when you say like, well, what was that experience like? You say, well, like when I hold it, my child, like I observe that person. This is I am that. And in Hinduism, they say tat twamasi,
Mm.
thou art that. You are that divine being, which is the kind of cliched idea that we are what we're looking for when we're looking for love in all the wrong places, right? So the experience was I am perfect, whole, and complete
Yeah.
within myself. And nobody had ever told me that before.
Yeah. Wow. Extremely powerful. And what really hit me was when you said you were being love. There's a state of being in the place that you were in, and it wasn't feeling, it was actually being. Very profound. And people reach these states through all sorts of different modalities. It could be breath work, it could be psychedelic experiences, it could be something just sort of a profound moment of clarity that just sort of comes down at a particular moment, which is what it sounded like happened to you. So then you wanted that, obviously, you wanted that to extend, and you wanted to be able to generate that. So you landed on hypnotherapy. So let's talk about hypnotherapy. What is hypnotherapy and how does it work?
Well, hypnosis itself could be defined as a natural yet altered state of mind. So we're referring to a state of mind. And yet, when we talk about hypnosis, we're not just talking about like a meditative state. part of the definition implies that we have suggestibility or responsiveness to suggestion and communication with the subconscious mind. So if you consider your mind to be like an iceberg, the conscious mind that we're all aware of, the thinker in your head, that the logical, reasoning, analytical mind, that critical part of us is only about 10%. I don't know the exact numbers. I don't know if anybody does, but generally your conscious mind is a small part of who you are. The subconscious is like the mass of the iceberg. And hypnotherapy essentially gains access to the subconscious mind. We can put new programming in, and we can also talk directly with that mind. So one of the main characters that lives in the subconscious mind is the inner child. That's our emotional part. It's our wanting part. But really the subconscious is a place where all of our memories, all our beliefs, all our emotions are stored. And when I was so interested in duplicating this experience of absolute bliss consciousness, I learned that, well, that's everywhere. So you don't have to establish it. You don't have to create it, right? The energy of the whole universe already exists. It's not up to us to put it there. But we have to remove the blocks to the awareness of that. And hypnotherapy was the most powerful way I found, combined with things like breathwork, like you talk about, one of the most powerful ways to clear those blocks to where they never come back again. Most other modalities I studied were only treating symptoms. And my background is really serious in Chinese medicine, but through acupuncture, through herbs, through massage, I couldn't see how I could clear those blockages. You would think with acupuncture needles you can clear blocks, and you can. However, blocks are predominantly mental. Right? Once you go deep enough into Chinese medicine, you see most of the imbalances we're working to correct are the result of suppressed, stagnant emotions, right? Harboring anger, bottling, holding on to sadness and grief, or all that fear. It affects our organ systems and causes psychosomatic illness. So I really started specializing in healing the mind, healing the body, just because there is so much benefit to clearing our mental blocks, to allowing our physiology to rebalance itself. And that's really where I started focusing on how do we perform miracles, right? If miracles happen, why? And it had to be a mental process. And the only path I found, there's related modalities, but hypnotherapy was the most direct way in there.
Yeah. We're talking about magic here, and we're talking about some really, really fascinating cutting edge topics. But what's interesting is throughout the history of man, there have been different rites of passage. There have been different ceremonial types of group come-togethers, for lack of a better term, that really did focus on this, being able to connect and discover what your true essence is, and to discover the singularity in it all. So for example, I do a lot of work in the psychedelic medicine community, right? And I do a lot of work in the breathwork community, and I'm very involved with the transcendental meditation and with the foundation and all of that. And what I found in that work is that people who really take a commitment to the work, they find themselves healing all sorts of ancestral wounds and all sorts of things that have happened to them in their life. They begin to come out of it and begin to heal. And they also begin to come to whatever we call self-actualization, being sort of more resolute and stabilized in who they are, because now they've touched their essence. So I find both of those as being extremely aligned, right? So I combine those because what I find in the work that I do is those that seek healing eventually get moved towards self-actualization. So my question is, how does hypnotherapy differ, right? So if for example, a psychedelic ceremony or breath work, it's clear cut how those processes and modalities work. There's a level of commitment. There's a level of actual physical commitment towards the practice. And I want to learn more about hypnotherapy and understand how that differs.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for instance, if you take ayahuasca, which I've done, so I can speak from experience, being around people who have done it in other plant medicines, it can amplify the life force energy inside of you and essentially bring your blockages up to consciousness. So I know people who have done ayahuasca and repressed memories of sexual abuse come up, and those are blocks, right? And that's a chance to clear that. Breath work, same thing. You're hyperoxygenating the body, enormous amount of life force, hits your blocks, brings them to consciousness. Transcendental meditation you mentioned doesn't necessarily, right? Usually that's like transcending the human, going into higher consciousness, finding the peace of your own soul, but not necessarily dealing with what's in the subconscious. So at least that's how I understand it. So the modalities of breath work or plant medicines can bring stuff to consciousness. The difference perhaps in hypnotherapy, depending on who's doing breath work or whatnot, but in hypnotherapy, we have very powerful transformational modalities that can resolve the content that comes up. So if you go to a group breathwork session, everybody's crying and screaming and laughing and catharting, but how much facilitation actually happens, right? It feels really good. I mean, first it can be really painful, but it can feel really good to release that energy. But what we do in hypnotherapy is, and I combine breathwork and hypnotherapy, once the emotions are really strong, the memories that cause the emotions tend to follow. But if you don't know what to do with those memories, you kind of are half resolved. So in hypnotherapy, the way I teach it, we incorporate Gestalt dialogues because my model of hypnotherapy is called interpersonal hypnotherapy. We're dealing with the characters, the people, the internal people in our subconscious mind. And quite often that's a parent-child conflict. The inner child and the inner parent are duking it out. And the primary energy there is guilt, right? The parent makes you feel bad for having your feelings. And in the Gestalt, we're really working to bring that to a place of love and wholeness. So it's incorporating forgiveness and compassion formulas, incorporating core state work that guides people to, so once you move through your blocks, and then we process your belief systems, clear the negative emotions, raise your self-esteem, then we can guide you into the core state. And that's characterized by words like peace, love, joy, bliss, oneness. So I've just found hypnotherapy, especially the way I've refined it over the years, a systematic way to bring blockages to consciousness, but then to clear them so they never come back. I'll have people who do group breath work and they go, I brought up a lot of stuff, but I don't feel like it's resolved. And in a 2-hour hypnotherapy session, as long as we're following the protocol and everything goes smooth, the issue that came up is going to be resolved and should never need to be repeated. So when true healing occurs, it really shouldn't have to be repeated. But yeah, I've seen people doing plant medicine and breath work, but just didn't have enough facilitation maybe to resolve everything that brought to consciousness.
That's a very powerful and bold statement. And I've heard it before. Does everyone have the ability to go through this therapy? I've heard that there's certain people that can't be hypnotized. Is that true?
Well, I don't really subscribe to that model. If a person can talk, if they can hear me, if they can make the phone call to work with me, I can help them. So we work with the model that there's no poor client, only poorly trained hypnotherapists. Right? So if you go to a car mechanic, he's like, yeah, I just can't help you. It's like, is it the car mechanic or is it you? It's probably the car mechanic. So I'm so well trained. I've like 25 years of experience, and I run one of the leading schools in the country. Like, we have modalities that can help virtually anybody, and we're not really dependent on hypnosis. So let's say they're not going into the hypnotic state. Good. Well, start breath work. It can get to the same place, basically. So a lot of what we do with hypnosis is a hypnotic regression back to childhood to deal with the issues. But breath work will bring that up too. So if the client can't respond well to hypnosis for some reason, there's other ways, but we can also get them to respond to hypnosis. So we can help them to realize they've suffered enough. And then if there's willingness to change, a lot of reasons we don't go into hypnosis are control fallacies. Like if I go into hypnosis, I'll cluck like a chicken. I'll be out of control. I'll say things I don't want to say. I'll do things I don't want to do. I'll have to take my clothes off and give you all my money. It's like once we dispel those myths and misconceptions and people feel safe, like once you clear the fear, they tend to go into hypnosis, no problem. But that's the hypnotherapist's responsibility. You can't blame the client and say, oh, you're just resisting. You're not a good client. Well, maybe that person's legitimately scared, and it's our job to help them to overcome that.
Yeah, so many myths, it sounds like, tied to hypnotism and hypnotherapy because of how it's been sort of showcased as for entertainment value over the years. So we've talked a little bit about healing, and we've talked about transformation. I'm curious about high-performing individuals, like in other words, those who want to perform at peak levels. We're talking about, business leaders and executives and other people, athletes, other people like that. So how can hypnotherapy assist these sorts of individuals?
Oh, in incredible ways. So what I offer is something called the Life Mastery course through our school and as a separate CEU course. And you use the word self-actualization. To me, self-actualization could be also synonymous with life mastery. It's when you're successful in every category of your life. So the first thing you can do with a high achiever is list the 10 major life categories: your spirituality, your mental emotional health, physical health, career and finances, relationships, free time and recreation, vacation and travel, your home, your transportation, then education, or maybe philanthropy or volunteer work. So, 10 or 11 categories. And then we say, how actualized do you feel in all of those categories? Essentially, where there's some feeling of lack or you're not quite there yet, we can use basic hypnotic programming to offer suggestions for that. Like, let's say you're making a lot of money, you've got a great business, but you're overweight, you're not exercising. We can just use hypnosis for weight loss and to motivate you to exercise.
Mm.
So I love, like, my favorite sessions are working with like CEOs and leaders, and just really getting into, okay, you make a lot of money,
Mm.
but do you meditate? Have you really connected to your true essence? And I find that using those 10 categories, I can find where they might be lacking, even though it might look like on the surface that they're really thriving. Also, even
Mm.
though some people could be type A, very successful, they're not necessarily at peace inside. They could still have that wounded inner child. They could still be closing their heart. They could still have relationship challenges. Everybody has some level of low self-esteem. And we can dig around in there and be like, okay, I know you feel confident, self-assured, secure within yourself. Yet there's a part of you telling me that I work with a COO, an attorney right now, as one of my clients. And I heard words like loser, failure, not good enough. And this is a super high achiever. But you get down into the
Mhm.
subconscious mind and you realize, we all had a childhood and we've all been negatively programmed to some degree by our parents. So yeah, I just like to
That's right.
probe around and help people to realize there's so much more about what it means to be self-actualized.
Yeah. And, outwardly achievements are many times the result of some sort of winning formula, some sort of core strengths on in the outside that people have actually adapted themselves in order to be able to achieve and succeed in the outwardly world. But being an executive coach myself, some of the highest achievers and some of the quote unquote successful people are also some of the most sad a lot of the times, feeling empty. A lot of the times they've gotten to whatever that top of that outwardly hill is, and they still feel this void, this missing. And so the sort of general thought is, well, he or she's made it and, they're successful. What could they possibly need at this point? And that's a huge misnomer. Outwardly success does not translate to internal harmony. Those are two very, very different states. So let's talk a little bit about that. In terms of releasing self-limiting beliefs, and I find that a lot of people find themselves in that position where they just have these sort of almost catalyzed self-limiting beliefs. Do you find that hypnotherapy is something that can release those as well?
Absolutely. And that's very much why I do hypnotherapy, because my background in Chinese medicine showed me, okay, yes, there's energy blockages, but once I got deep enough, I realized these are actually emotions primarily. Like, why do our meridians get blocked? Why do we have issues with the organ systems from an energetic level? And really, it's usually suppressing emotion. But what's underneath all that painful emotion that we don't want to feel? False beliefs, our core beliefs. So people, when, like, if you're angry,
Mm.
underneath that is going to be something like, I'm trapped, I'm powerless, I'm helpless, I'm out of control. And then you get angry to try to make that better, but you don't know what to do with your anger, so you bottle it up. And inside that bottled up anger are all those low self-esteem
Mm.
beliefs. So, and then inside the anger is actually a lot of fear, right? So getting to those beliefs, the
Mm.
first step is you bring it to
Mm.
consciousness, right? And then I realized once I clear those beliefs, the emotions drop away and any symptoms or behaviors that arise from those beliefs and emotions drop away. So the beliefs are very much the core. If we want to go a little bit deeper, where do the beliefs come from? They come from our memories. So
Mm.
the memories act as reinforcing evidence. So if somebody believes they're
Mm.
unlovable, you can keep telling them through hypnotic programming or whatever, you're lovable, you're lovable. Even in hypnosis, they can reject that because the memories support, apparent evidence where dad said no, or one verbally or non-verbally convinced you you're not lovable.
Mm.
Until the memory is brought to consciousness, we're not really fully empowered to clear the belief. But it's more, so I teach what I call interpersonal hypnotherapy. It's more than just working to resolve the memory, it's focusing directly on the relationship. And what you find in that relationship is some level of unforgiveness, right? Something we haven't let go of yet, something that we're still harboring. So by applying true forgiveness and then reframing those belief systems or just transforming them into the truth of who we really are, we really set a person free. And essentially in that level of working, you're collapsing the problem from the bottom up. right? We're not treating symptoms. We're not treating emotions. We're not even treating the
Mm,
beliefs, although we definitely address them. We're really looking at the memories and then the relationships within the
mm,
memories, honoring there's some level of unforgiveness. So really, my experience has been all true healing is rooted in forgiveness. Because when you get down to the root of it, there's some unresolved
mm.
relationship at the core.
Absolutely. And decision making, right? Decision making. Can it assist individuals to make clearer and more confident decisions?
Yes, for sure. So I love the model about decisions that when we make a choice, the choice remains in place until we choose again. So it's important in hypnotherapy, we're going to look at what choices have you already made. Like, let's say somebody says, I got really hurt. I'm never going to love again. That decision was already made, and that heart will stay closed until we choose again. So part of it is reversing old decisions that hold us back. Yet there's another way of working where we acknowledge that we have what we call a higher self or a superconscious mind. So you have a subconscious mind, which is almost synonymous with your inner child, the lower emotional part of you. Sometimes it's called the
Mm.
reptilian brain, like that level of our being, kind of a primitive mind. Then we have our conscious mind, which just thinks, and like how many times
Yeah.
has your conscious mind been wrong? So where do we turn for advice when we want to make really good decisions? If we turn to our subconscious mind, which is our emotional feeling mind, we're essentially turning to a 5-year-old. Most hypnotic regressions back to childhood, from my experience, tend to be about 5 years old. So if you ask your heart, what should you be doing? Well, that could be a little boy or girl in there who's really sad, hurt, angry, and dealing with a lot of low self esteem is going to make decisions for you. Not always the best thing. If you turn to your conscious mind, that's just usually like the
Right.
dry intellect. Like, where's the intuition? Where's the passion? Where's something more than just
Mm.
logic? So when we acknowledge something called superconscious mind or higher self or oversoul or divine mind, even if we don't believe in that type of thing, if we get quiet enough inside, there is a deeper voice that is incredibly wise. And so you might just call that your higher, wiser mind. And again, I don't, when people are like atheistic and agnostic about it, I'm like,
Mm.
that's fine. But as soon as you get quiet enough, I'm telling you, you have that inside of you. And you'll be glad that you found it because it seems to know better than we know. So when I was in acupuncture college, I had a hypnotherapy session outside of it and just, private hypnotherapy session. And when I was coming out of hypnosis, there was a voice right in my face. I didn't see it, but I totally heard it. And it was almost like I heard it in my ears, but not quite. It said, "You are going to be a hypnotherapist." I said, "No, I'm going to be a doctor of oriental medicine." And the voice said, "No, you're going to be a hypnotherapist." And it wasn't the first time I heard the voice, but it's always right. And it'll only repeat itself once. It'll say it once, I'll argue with it, and then it'll repeat itself again. And then sure enough, I'll find out maybe years later, wow, it was right. So I was once working with a psychic medical intuitive healer he said to learn to tap into that voice. And he said, ask a question, you'll get an answer. I said, how could I heal some other girlfriend? I said, how can I heal my girlfriend of ulcerative colitis? And that voice said, she's already healed. I said, no, she's not. She's clearly sick. The voice said she's already healed. And I learned later on that voice was right. If I saw her as perfect, whole, and complete, I was already helping her to heal instead of labeling and judging her as sick. So making decisions, back to your idea of decisions, from that higher,
Yes.
wiser mind, you might say, for those who believe in God, it's like it's letting God run your life instead of your neurotic, conscious, and subconscious mind. So I
Mm.
do sincerely believe there's something
Mm.
higher that we can tap into, and that's the best way to be making decisions. And really, Jiddu Krishnamurti, he said, all decision is the
Mm.
sign of a confused mind. We're only thinking we have to make decisions because we're confused. Once
Mm.
we're really clear, the path is right in front of us. Choices, life is actually
Yeah.
relatively simple when we're not confused. So there's really no decision to make.
Yeah.
There's just the Tao, the harmony of things, the way of life. And you just flow with it. And it's really pretty easy once you're out of
Yes.
your conscious mind.
Yes, absolutely. I just had a conversation today actually about allowing for the space in a conversation. I was speaking to somebody about some trepidation they were having about someone who was receiving their communication in a way that just wasn't they didn't feel was healthy, and so when we dug in a little bit, the idea of going into the conversation brand new, whole and complete, showing love and really just letting go of whatever happened in the previous conversation, any previous experiences, allows them and you in that container, in that conversation to show up anew where more possibilities are present. So what you just described is a version of that, and it's extremely powerful. I want to talk a little bit about the NLP because and by the way, for those who don't know, NLP is neuro linguistic programming. This is something that's been utilized by all sorts of motivational type leaders like Tony Robbins and people like that in being able to use their words to cause transformation and to open up insight. Can you tell me a little bit about NLP in terms of how you use it and how does it help to support your hypnotherapy practice?
So there's a significant difference, although there's definitely overlap, in the approach that NLP and hypnotherapy has. NLP tends to deal with what we call structure, where hypnotherapy deals more with content. So you and I were talking about the content of the subconscious mind, and that's our memories, our beliefs, our emotions, and the relationships that are involved in those memories. The content is important. So how do we serve clients with that? Largely in hypnosis, we can reprogram that by kind of talking directly at the subconscious mind, or we can talk with the subconscious mind and work to transform the content that's in there. In NLP, while we can do some of that work, NLP focuses more on structure, meaning what is the internal structure of your mind? How are you forming your inner patterns of how you're perceiving the world? So, for instance, if somebody was afraid of spiders, in hypnosis, we might want to regress them back to the root cause where maybe they were bitten by a spider. In NLP, while we can do that type of work to a degree, it's not as important. Mostly we would ask them, teach me how to have your problem. What are you doing inside that makes that spider scary to you? Do you see it big up right close in your face? Do you see those fangs really close and the hairy legs and all those eyeballs? Like, if I did that in my mind, I would be scared too. So
Yeah.
NLP is largely about modeling excellence that we see in others, but not just their behaviors, their inner way of being. So if I'm not afraid of spiders, I could essentially teach my client, this is how you could structure your mind where you're not going to have the fear. And there's a lot of techniques in NLP that help us to change that structure. And sometimes those shifts can be quite rapid. You're not necessarily dealing with the root cause, although again, NLP has some ways to do that. But if a person gets the relief they're looking for, that's great. But in hypnotherapy, I really do care about root cause so that we know that if we relieve a symptom, it's not going to manifest itself in some worse way later. So if you just stop a negative behavior, but you don't deal with the underlying root cause, that can be an issue. And sometimes some NLP practitioners might not be focusing on the deeper content that could be transformed. But again, if a person finds relief at any level, then that's really what we're looking for.
Yeah, I get it. So the NLP isn't actually used during a hypnotherapy session. It sounds like it's used in integrating what was gained from the hypnotherapy session into a patient's or a client's daily life. Does that sound like the correct application?
Well, I wouldn't want to limit it. There's definitely very creative ways to integrate hypnotherapy and NLP. In fact,
Mm.
I would say a lot of my hypnotherapy work is using certain type of NLP techniques, like even the rapport building skills of NLP become part of a good hypnotherapy session. Um, when we are inducing hypnosis, there's different NLP language patterns we can use to help to deepen the state. When we want to help a client revisit a certain state, we could use anchors and triggers, and all that comes from NLP. So they blend quite well, and both could be used to integrate things into our life. So I would say that they're just complementary.
Mm. Oh, that's fascinating. If you are working with business leaders and other high performers, a lot of the times they look for improvement in focus, motivation, and productivity, and ultimately achieving goals more effectively. How does hypnotherapy and NLP assist with those particular needs?
So once we get clear, we do a very thorough intake and we get clear on what are the client's goals, right? So they say, I want to make more money. I want to get my business this level. It's in NLP, we focus a lot on the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic. So teach me, kind of explain to me, to my client, I'd be saying, show me what it looks like. Let's paint the picture of that. What would it sound like? And then tell me, like, what would it feel like?
Mm.
Once I have some sense of where they want to go, I could also focus on what might be holding them back. But if we just focus on the movement towards the positive, then essentially we use a model called TOTE, test, operate, test, exit. So how close do you feel like you are to those goals now? Let's like rate it from 1 to 10. So now I'm at a 2. 10 would be when I'm there. We can do different exercises, and it's the word, the O is operate. We do different NLP techniques, and those techniques are usually only about 5 to 10 minutes each. But then we test again after each technique. Okay, we got you feeling like you're at a 4 now. You feel more motivated. You feel excited. Then we can do another technique. What else do we need to make that even better? And then we talk about feeling charismatic or disciplined or, like you said, like focused. And we can use techniques to get that state of being. And essentially, test, operate, test, exit means after we've done enough techniques and we've tested and realized, okay, we got you at a 10 now, then E, exit. So once I get a client to a 10, or like with pain management, we might measure it the other way from like a 10 down to a 0. But once you get them to that peak state of being, then I love to use hypnotic programming to just program all of that positive stuff in. So every positive word, all the imagery, all the feelings can be put into a hypnotic program recording. And then somebody like that could use that recording every day for months. Right, so we just make an MP3, and they go home, they go into hypnosis, and they're hearing a lot of the NLP techniques, but they're doing it in their own hypnotic state. And yeah, they just have the recording on their iPhone, and they could sit there before work for like 25 minutes, getting their mind in the right place, and it can change your entire workday. I mean, I honestly do hypnosis at least once a day. It helps to reset your autonomic nervous system. It helps you to program in anything you want to. And like we've been talking about, you can embed a lot of NLP techniques and language patterns into that programming. So yeah, anybody who's a leader who wants to thrive in their career, if they're not using hypnosis and NLP, they're definitely missing some really powerful tools.
Wow. This is fascinating technology to be able to go in and reorganize your operating system. And wow, this is cutting edge, fascinating technology. What are some recommended resources or programs for people interested in exploring hypnotherapy and NLP for both personal and professional development?
So I can pretty much recommend my websites because we are a leader in the field. So my website, Institute of Hypnotherapy.com, has over 500 hours of free conscious community classes that anybody could listen to. So at instituteofhypnotherapy.com, there's classes on hypnosis, NLP, spiritual growth, A Course in Miracles, out-of-body experiences, prosperity consciousness, life mastery work. So those are really powerful resources. There's definitely classes, free classes on NLP. For those who want to go deeper into some of the meditative teachings, like the spiritual side of things, I have another website called onlinemonastery.com that can teach people how to meditate in a really powerful way, inspired largely by Zen and yogic traditions. So, yeah, I would definitely just recommend those two websites. Honestly, there's tons of free resources there.
Yes, absolutely. So when I'm listening to this very powerful modality, I'm finding that what an incredible time to be alive when what was once thought of as something that was maybe, mystical, out of reach, almost woo-woo, has now not only been backed by science, but people like you are out there actually allowing individuals and training individuals and working with people to be able to expand and to grow and to heal and to transform. Extremely powerful stuff. And the way that you articulate it is just such a pragmatic, practical way for people to be able to use it in their own lives is nothing short of groundbreaking. So I want to acknowledge you for this. If the last question I have is, what are some future trends or advancements in hypnotherapy or NLP that we can expect to see now that the landscape is changing and these sorts of therapies are now becoming something that's accepted by the mainstream?
Yeah, a major movement we have in our institute is bringing neuroscience into the equation, and we haven't promoted any of it yet. It's just behind the scenes developing. Yet I work with different medical professionals and PhDs, and we discuss the idea of really the mind-body connection. So to make it not so woo-woo, we can say, like, what does inner peace do to your physiology? Right? What does love do to your physical heart? And you can measure these things, right? There are ways of actually showing anybody, if you just access a certain state of being, it's going to help you in all these ways. And with the science behind that, Like in A Course in Miracles, it teaches peace is health. And I think a lot of us understand intuitively, well, that kind of makes sense. If I'm in a state of perfect peace, how could I have psychosomatic illness? Why would I have any stress-induced illness? But they might not value forgiveness and inner peace because you can't prove it and it's woo-woo. But once you see, studies that show you can measure the changes in the body, then it just becomes, like you said, really pragmatic. It's just practical to say, peace, love, joy, bliss, oneness. While it used to be woo-woo, now neuroscience can show exactly what's happening physiologically. Like gratitude is so wonderfully proven to affect the human heart. But until we hear the science, maybe we're not going to choose to practice gratitude. So that's really where I see it going, is bridging the gap between the mystical and the woo-woo and actually the hardcore science.
Matthew Brownstein, what a fascinating conversation. For those of you that are interested in learning more, you can go to Institute of Hypnotherapy.com. And also you can go to onlinemonastery.com. And your institute is located in Florida. And there's so many different online training tools, all sorts of free things to download, extremely comprehensive website. Matthew, thank you so much for coming into the Alchemist Lounge and sharing all the work that you're doing with hypnotherapy, with NLP, really taking all of this work and delivering it in a way that is extremely powerful and accessible for those of us and for really all of humanity that can absolutely benefit from this work. I want to thank you for being on the show and looking forward to seeing more in this field.
Nice. Thank you so much, Alex. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely.
You've been listening to the Alchemist Lounge. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, find Alex on LinkedIn and Twitter at Alex Atwood and on Instagram at AlexAtwood_coaching. See you next time on the Alchemist Lounge.